back. Well, let's bring in now our Wednesday panel, former Victorian Liberal Party President Michael Kroger and Labor legend Graham Richardson. Great to see you both. Look, we're going to get to the inflation data in just a minute, but I just want to get your reaction to Peter Dutton's comments there. Michael Kroger, very specifically about the ABC, he said that it was about time that Kim Williams showed some backbone, reined in the ABC. He said that journalists like Laura Tingle but others were hijacking the public broadcaster. He said there was an inherent bias in it, a cultural bias. He said it's taxpayers' money, it needs to be objective in its reporting, that it's clearly not. And he said that most Australians find it a distraction from their daily lives instead of finding it the informative source of news that it's meant to be, and also, of course, accusing it of an anti-Israel bias. What did you think of those comments, Michael Kroger?
Well, of course, Dutton's absolutely right. And the Sydney-based ABC News and Current Affairs division is holding hostage the rest of the ABC. I mean, rural ABC, which is fantastic, rural radio, which is great, kids, children's drama, sport, comedy, etc., are all being tarnished by this sort of horrific sort of hard left bias coming out of the Sydney News and Current Affairs division. It's been going on for years, and of course Peter Dutton is right. Kim Williams is someone who was brought in, and there was a lot of hope that Kim Williams, who owed nothing to anybody, would come in and just clean up this sort of, stalwart of left-wing, propaganda, and let's hope he does. I mean, Ida's now come out and said, oh, the thing's biased. Well, good on you, Ida. We tried to warn you about that when you were there. So let's hope Kim Williams can do something, because the ABC is tarnishing its brand, and it's doing it very badly, Shari.
So, Richo, Peter Dutton's criticism in particular of Laura Tingle, saying she's hijacking the ABC, well, this comes after Laura Tingle has been very critical of the opposition leader in recent times. She's accused him of adopting Trumpian language, of having a loose grasp of the facts, criticised his nuclear policy. So is it surprising that Dutton has come out this strongly? And do you agree, should Kim Williams rein in the journalists like Dutton has demanded?
Well, I think that Kim Williams is going to have a quiet word in her ear, because I think she has gone over the top. I think Dutton's absolutely entitled to say it's wrong. I'm not going to get in the road of that. As far as I'm concerned, the ABC does have a duty to be impartial, and occasionally, and I might say it's only occasional, but it does go over the top, and I think cross a line you shouldn't cross.
Well, let's look at the inflation data today. Annual inflation rose to 3.8%, up from 3.6% from the start of the year. Now, this was in line with the RBA's forecast, but not Treasury's. If there is a silver lining in today's data, it's that underlying inflation declined ever so slightly from 4% to 3.9%. Michael Kroger, there's been debate over these figures today. We've heard opposing views from the Treasurer Jim Chalmers and the Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor. What's your view?
Well, as you know, I've never taken the view that there'll be 3 interest rate rises this year. I didn't ever think that was politically possible. But it looks as if next Tuesday, the RBA won't do anything, and it's now a wait-and-see game. I've always taken the view that Albanese needs a rate cut before he goes to election, because he promised people that he would be able to solve the cost of living crisis. He said he had a plan to fix this, and he won hundreds of thousands of votes on the basis of that and the $275 cut to power prices. So one of the reasons his polls are declining, he promised beyond his capacity to deliver. And that is now doing him immense damage when people see he's on these issues, he's an empty suit. And he's not helped, by the way, by Jim Chalmers, who I'm sure is a very nice fellow, but as I've said for months, Jim's a commentator. I mean, Jim can just tell you what's happening. Well, I can read that in the newspapers. He's about to deliver 4 budgets. The next 4 budgets will have over $100 billion worth of deficits, Shari, which are forecast, which is why there won't be another budget before the next election. But Albanese is spending far too much money, and any increase in aggregate demand puts pressure on prices and therefore inflation.
Richo, what do you think? Do you think this will take the pressure off a rate hike next week, the data that we saw today?
Well, I think it takes some pressure off, but not enough. I think I expect more rate rises. I'm not sure they're very good politically, but I expect them. I think Jim Chalmers is a brilliant guy, but I think he's got to be a bit tougher. I think he needs to do more, and he needs to show those around him that he's got what it takes. Because obviously, I think there's a baton in the knapsack somewhere there. So if you're carrying the baton, you need to show you're worthy.
Well, I mean, many of us think he would be a leadership successor to Albanese, but while we're on this topic, Richo, what about Tony Burke thinking he's some prime ministerial aspirant and now Albo's elevated him to the Home Affairs portfolio? Surely no one is seriously considering Tony Burke as a future prime minister.
Well, I don't think that Tony would be out of the running. I think he's certainly in there, but future prime minister's hard. Chalmers and Miles have got a pretty big head start on him, and it's hard to catch up.
Yeah, that would be a joke, wouldn't it, Michael Kroger? Having someone like Tony Burke as a prime minister?
Well, you and I might be laughing, but I don't think so. I mean, Burke is one of the hard men of Labor. He's delivered for the unions in his portfolio. He's a very good media performer, right? He won't be caught like Giles and O'Neill. He's a very good media performer. He'll have the backing now of a lot of the trade unions. And look, in the end, the cream rises to the top. And his performance as a Labor minister, right, as a Labor minister in terms of appealing to the Labor caucus and the Labor faithful, he's done a lot more to win votes amongst his constituency than Chalmers has or Richard Marles has. So I think Richard's fading. And Chalmers is just, as Richo absolutely says, Jim Chalmers is obviously a hell of a nice bloke. You'd prefer him at a barbecue than Tony Burke, but that's not what we're going for here. And so I think Burke's stocks have risen dramatically within the caucus, whilst Chalmers is fading, because Jim just can't make a point. You've got to make some enemies in this business, as Richo knows better than anyone. You've got to make enemies to make anything. He who makes no enemies makes nothing at all. Jim's a hell of a nice bloke. He's handing out, free confetti at the weddings. But he's a lovely fellow. But boy, he's just a commentator. He's a suburban newspaper journalist writing about the local sport, telling us what happened on Saturday. Doesn't want to make any enemies, Jim, and that doesn't serve you well in politics.
Quick final word, Richo.
I think Jim could do with a few more enemies. I'll leave it at that.
All right, Michael Kroger, Graham Richardson, thank you both very much for joining me.